The harsh wind howled outside the small cabin as Genevieve Fletcher clutched her blanket tighter around her trembling shoulders, her fever rising with each passing hour. Wyoming Territory, 1876, was unforgiving in winter, especially to a woman alone in the wilderness. 3 days ago, she had been traveling to Lone Pine when disaster struck, leaving her stranded and ill in this abandoned trapper's cabin. Now, as darkness fell and her consciousness wavered, she wondered if death might come for her before the dawn. The creak of the cabin door startled her from delirium. Through fever-glazed eyes, she saw a tall silhouette enter, snow swirling around broad shoulders before the door closed against the storm. "Don't be afraid, madam," a deep voice said as strong hands set down supplies. "Name's Vincent Vance. Found your horse wandering 3 miles back. Figured someone might be in trouble." Genevieve tried to respond, but her parched lips barely moved. The fever had taken too strong a hold. Vincent crossed the room in 3 long strides, his expression shifting from wariness to concern as he took in her condition. "You're burning up something fierce," he muttered, removing his gloves to press a cool palm against her forehead. Little did either of them know that the blizzard trapping them would last 3 days, and that the cowboy's dedication to keeping her alive would forge a bond neither had been seeking in the vast, untamed wilderness of Wyoming. Vincent moved with the efficiency of a man accustomed to survival. He stoked the dying embers in the fireplace, adding kindling and logs from the meager pile in the corner. The cabin gradually filled with warmth as flames climbed higher, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls. "Water," Genevieve managed to whisper, her throat painfully dry. Vincent nodded, pulling a canteen from his saddlebag. With gentle hands that belied his rugged appearance, he lifted her head and helped her drink. Water spilled down her chin, but she managed several desperate swallows. "Easy now," he said, his voice softer than before. "What's your name?" "Genevieve," she whispered. "Genevieve Fletcher." "You're mighty sick, Miss Fletcher. How long you been here alone?" "2 days. Maybe 3. Lost track." Her eyes fluttered closed as another wave of fever washed over her. Vincent surveyed the cabin with a practiced eye. It was small but sturdy, one room with a bed, table, fireplace, and little else. The previous occupant had left suddenly, judging by the layer of dust on everything except where Genevieve had disturbed it. Outside, the blizzard was worsening, wind screaming through cracks in the walls. "Well, Miss Fletcher," he said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him, "looks like we're weathering this storm together. I'll keep you alive if it's the last thing I do." He set about making the cabin more habitable, gathering the few supplies he'd brought and taking stock of what was available. His own journey to Lone Pine would have to wait. Right now, this woman needed him, and Vincent Vance was not a man who abandoned those in need. Through the night, he tended to Genevieve, placing cool cloths on her forehead and coaxing sips of water between her cracked lips. Her nightgown was damp with sweat, her golden hair plastered to her flushed face. Vincent kept his eyes averted as much as possible, maintaining her dignity even in her unconscious state. When dawn broke, the storm showed no signs of abating. Vincent stepped outside briefly to check on his horse, which he had sheltered in a small lean-to beside the cabin. The animal nickered softly as Vincent fed him some oats. "Looks like we're staying put, Ranger," he told the chestnut gelding, patting his neck. "Got ourselves a situation inside." Back in the cabin, Genevieve was thrashing in her delirium, mumbling words he couldn't understand. Vincent approached cautiously, worried about what he might need to do if her condition worsened. He wasn't a doctor, but years on the frontier had taught him a thing or two about treating fevers. He searched the cabin and found a few jars of dried herbs. One smelled like willow bark, which he knew could help with fever. He brewed a strong tea, then gently roused Genevieve. "Miss Fletcher, I need you to drink this," he urged, supporting her head. "It'll help bring down the fever." Her eyes opened slightly, revealing irises the color of spring grass. "Who?" she murmured, disoriented. "Vincent Vance found you yesterday. You're sick with fever." Recognition flickered briefly. The cowboy, with the kind eyes. Vincent felt an unexpected warmth at her words. "That's right. Now drink this tea. It's bitter, but it'll help." She grimaced at the taste but swallowed obediently. When she finished, Vincent eased her back onto the pillow and pulled the blankets up to her chin. "Rest now," he said. "I'll keep the fire going," and keep it going he did. Through that day and into the next night, Vincent maintained a steady blaze in the fireplace, venturing out only to tend to his horse and gather more firewood from the small shed behind the cabin. The blizzard continued unabated, piling snow against the cabin walls and howling like a pack of wolves. By the morning of the second day, Vincent was exhausted but determined. He'd slept in short bursts, always waking to check on Genevieve and add more wood to the fire. Her fever seemed neither better nor worse, which he took as a small victory. While she slept, Vincent explored the cabin more thoroughly. In a trunk beneath the bed, he found some preserved food, jerky, beans, and dried apples, along with a few books and a woman's dress that looked about Genevieve's size. He set these aside, thinking they might be useful when she recovered. As he was replacing the trunk, Genevieve stirred. "Vincent," she called weakly. He was at her side in an instant. "I'm here." "How long have you been here?" "Going on 2 days now." She tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. "I'm sorry to be such a burden." "No burden," he replied firmly. "Anyone would do the same." She managed a small smile. "Not anyone. A man with less honor would have left me to die, or worse." Vincent looked away, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "How'd you end up here anyway? This cabin's a fair piece from anywhere." Genevieve closed her eyes, remembering. "I was traveling to Lone Pine to take a position as the new schoolteacher. My stagecoach was attacked by bandits 3 days' ride from town. The driver and guard were killed, but I managed to escape with one of the horses. I rode blindly, terrified they would follow. Then the snow started." Her voice trailed off. "And you found this place," Vincent finished. "Lucky thing." "Yes, though I fear luck abandoned me after that. I became ill so quickly." She paused, studying him with clearer eyes than before. "What brings you to these parts, Mr. Vance?" Vincent hesitated. He wasn't accustomed to sharing his business with strangers, but something about Genevieve Fletcher made him want to trust her. "Looking for work," he said finally. "Heard the cattle operations near Lone Pine were hiring experienced hands. I've been driving herds since I was 16, figured it was time to settle in one place for a spell." "How old are you now?" she asked. 28 next month." He poked at the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. "And yourself?" 23 last September." They fell silent, listening to the wind. Genevieve's eyes grew heavy again, the brief conversation having drained her limited strength. "Rest," Vincent said. "I'll make some broth when you wake." She nodded, already drifting off. Vincent watched her for a moment, struck by how vulnerable yet resilient she seemed. Most Eastern women would have succumbed to panic in such circumstances, but Genevieve Fletcher had survived alone for days before he found her. As promised, when she woke hours later, Vincent had broth ready. He'd made it from some dried meat and roots he'd found in the cabin stores. It wasn't much, but it would help restore her strength. "Think you can sit up?" he asked. "I'll try," she said, though her arms trembled with the effort. Without asking permission, Vincent slid an arm behind her shoulders and propped her up against the headboard. The casual contact sent an unexpected jolt through him, and he quickly busied himself with arranging the blankets around her. "Thank you," she murmured, color rising in her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. Vincent handed her the cup of broth. "Careful, it's hot." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Genevieve averted her eyes, focusing intently on the steaming liquid. "You mentioned bandits," Vincent said after she had taken a few sips. "Any idea who they were? Description might help the sheriff when we get to Lone Pine." Genevieve's hands tightened around the cup. 4 men, rough-looking. The leader had a scar across his cheek and called himself Rex. Said they were the Dixon Gang. Vincent's expression darkened. "Dixon Gang's been terrorizing this territory for months. They've hit 3 stagecoaches that I know of. Will they come looking for me, do you think?" Fear crept into her voice. Vincent shook his head. "Not likely. Snow's covered any tracks and they probably think you died in the storm, but I'll keep watch just the same." Genevieve nodded, comforted by his presence despite their short acquaintance. There was something solid and dependable about Vincent Vance, from his broad shoulders to his steady gaze. He exuded a quiet competence that made her feel safe for the first time in days. As evening approached, the blizzard intensified. Vincent reinforced the shutters and stuffed rags into the drafty cracks around the door. The wind found every weakness in the old cabin, whistling through unseen gaps and causing the fire to gutter occasionally. "Storm's getting worse," he observed, returning to Genevieve's bedside. Her fever had risen again, her face flushed and eyes glassy. "So cold," she whispered, teeth chattering despite the heat radiating from her skin. Vincent knew this was a dangerous sign. He'd seen men die of fever in similar conditions during his time driving cattle north. Without hesitation, he piled more blankets on her, then added the last of the firewood to the flames. "Need more wood," he muttered, pulling on his coat. "I'll check the lean-to, might be some there." "Don't go," Genevieve pleaded, suddenly afraid. "Please." Vincent paused, torn between the need for more firewood and her fear. "I'll be right back," he promised. "Just to the lean-to and back. Won't even lose sight of the cabin." She nodded reluctantly, and Vincent stepped out into the howling white. The cold hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. He pushed forward, leaning into the wind, and made his way to the lean-to where his horse stood nervously. "Easy, boy," he soothed, patting the animal before searching for wood. He found a small pile behind some tools and gathered as much as he could carry. His fingers grew numb quickly, but he worked methodically, knowing Genevieve's life might depend on maintaining the fire through this brutal night. Back inside, he stomped snow from his boots and hurried to the fireplace. Genevieve watched through half-closed eyes as he arranged the wood carefully, building the fire higher. "You came back," she whispered. Vincent glanced over his shoulder. "Said I would, didn't I?" Something in his tone made her smile despite her discomfort. "Yes, you did. I'm beginning to think you're a man of your word, Mr. Vance." "Vincent," he corrected. "Figure if we're sharing a cabin in a blizzard, we can dispense with formalities." "Vincent," she repeated softly. "And I'm Genevieve, not Miss Fletcher." He nodded, returning to his task. When the fire was blazing satisfactorily, he warmed some water and prepared another dose of willow bark tea. This time, he added honey from a small jar he'd discovered in the trunk, hoping to mask the bitterness. "This should help," he said, bringing the steaming cup to her. "Found some honey to make it more palatable." Genevieve accepted gratefully, but her hands shook so badly she couldn't hold the cup. Without comment, Vincent sat beside her on the bed and held it to her lips, supporting her head with his other hand. "Small sips," he instructed. She complied, her eyes never leaving his face. When she finished, Vincent set the cup aside but didn't immediately move away. In the firelight, He noticed details about her that had escaped him before: a small scar near her left eyebrow, the delicate curve of her jawline, the way her eyelashes cast tiny shadows on her cheeks. "You should rest," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "Will you tell me about yourself?" She asked suddenly. "Where you're from, your family, it helps. To think of something besides how awful I feel." Vincent hesitated, then nodded. He moved to the chair beside the bed, settling in for a long night of keeping watch. "Born in Missouri," he began. "Father was a farmer until the war. He didn't come home. Mother raised me and my sister until a fever took her when I was 15. "I'm sorry," Genevieve murmured. "What happened then?" "Sister married a shopkeeper in St. Louis. I headed west, signed on with a cattle outfit, been working trail drives ever since." He shrugged. "Not much else to tell. No wife, children?" Her question was innocent, but Vincent's expression closed. "No, never found the time for settling down." He stood abruptly. "Should check on the horse again." He left before she could respond, needing air despite the storm. Outside, sheltered in the doorway, Vincent took several deep breaths. It had been years since anyone had asked him such personal questions, longer still since he'd answered them. When he returned, Genevieve appeared to be sleeping. Vincent checked her forehead, still too warm, but perhaps slightly less so than before. He sat in the chair again, prepared for another night of vigilance. "I lost my parents too," Genevieve said suddenly, startling him. "Cholera 3 years ago. I was teaching at a small school in Pennsylvania when it happened." Vincent nodded, unsure what to say. "I came west because there was nothing left for me there," she continued. "Thought perhaps I could build something new in Lone Pine." "You will," Vincent assured her, "once you're well." She smiled faintly. "If I survive this fever." "You'll survive," he said with such certainty that she almost believed him. "I won't let you die, Genevieve." The intimacy of her name on his lips hung in the air between them. In the dancing firelight, something shifted, a connection forming despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of them. Genevieve's eyes grew heavy again. "Thank you, Vincent," she whispered as sleep claimed her. Vincent settled back in his chair, watching over her through the longest night of the storm. The second night proved even more challenging than the first. Genevieve's fever peaked near midnight, leaving her delirious and restless. She called out for people. Vincent didn't know her parents, friends, someone named Margaret. "SHH," he soothed, bathing her face with cool water. "You're safe." "They're coming," she insisted, trying to rise. "The bandits, they found us." Vincent gently pressed her back. "No one's coming. Just the storm." She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't leave me." "I won't," he promised, covering her hand with his own. "I'm right here." Eventually she calmed, drifting into fitful sleep. Vincent remained beside her, dozing occasionally but always jerking awake at her slightest movement. By dawn, his back ached from the awkward position in the chair, but he refused to leave her side. The storm began to abate as the third day dawned, the howling wind diminishing to occasional gusts. Vincent checked outside and found the snow nearly waist-deep, but no longer being driven horizontally by the wind. The sky remained gray, but no fresh snow fell. Back inside, he found Genevieve awake and more lucid than she'd been since his arrival. "The storm's passing," he told her, removing his coat. "How long has it been?" she asked. "This is the third day since I found you." Genevieve looked stunned. "You've been here 3 days, keeping the fire going all this time," Vincent shrugged. "Couldn't very well let it go out." She reached for his hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You saved my life, Vincent. I don't know how to thank you." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly. "Not anyone. You're a good man, Vincent Vance." He pulled his hand away gently, unused to such direct praise. "How are you feeling?" "Fever seems lower." Genevieve assessed her condition. "Weak but clearer. The room's not spinning anymore." "Good sign," Vincent nodded. "Think you could eat something more substantial?" "Got some beans I could heat up." "I'd like to try." While Vincent prepared a simple meal, Genevieve watched him move about the cabin. Despite his size, easily over 6 feet tall with shoulders broadened by years of physical labor, he moved with a natural grace, economical in his movements. His face, weathered by sun and wind, remained unreadable most of the time, but occasionally she caught glimpses of the man beneath the stoic exterior. "Were you afraid?" she asked suddenly. "When you found me, I mean. Most men would have been terrified to find a woman alone, possibly dying." Vincent considered her question as he stirred the beans. "Not afraid," he said finally. "Concerned. Didn't know if I could help you, but knew I had to try. Most would have left me or taken advantage." His eyes met hers, intense and serious. "I'm not most men." "No," she agreed softly. "You certainly aren't." The simple meal was the best thing Genevieve had tasted in days. She managed about half before her strength flagged, but Vincent was encouraged by her appetite. "Good sign," he repeated, taking the bowl. "Few more days, you'll be strong enough to travel." Genevieve's heart sank at the thought of leaving. Despite the circumstances, she had grown accustomed to Vincent's presence, his quiet competence, the safety she felt with him nearby. The idea of continuing to Lone Pine alone suddenly seemed daunting. "Will you be heading to Lone Pine as well?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Vincent nodded. "That's still my plan. Need to find work before my funds run too low." "Perhaps we could travel together," she suggested, "when I'm stronger." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Makes sense. Safer that way, especially with the Dixon gang in these parts." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you." Vincent turned away, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Should check on the wood supply. Storm's passing, but it's still plenty cold." Outside, the world was transformed. Brilliant white stretched in all directions, unmarked save for the tracks Vincent had made checking on his horse. The air was crisp and still, the sky beginning to clear. In the distance, mountains rose like sentinels against the horizon. Vincent gathered more wood, his mind turning over the strange situation he found himself in. 3 days ago, he'd been a solitary traveler, responsible only for himself. Now, he was caring for a fever-stricken schoolteacher who looked at him with gratitude, and something else he couldn't or wouldn't name. It had been years since Vincent had allowed himself to feel anything for a woman. The last time had ended badly, leaving scars deeper than any physical wound. Yet something about Genevieve Fletcher bypassed his carefully constructed defenses, making him aware of her in ways that went beyond simple concern for a fellow human. He shook his head, dismissing such thoughts. She was vulnerable, ill, dependent on him for survival. Any feelings that might be developing were circumstances of their situation, nothing more. Once they reached Lone Pine, they would go their separate ways, she to her teaching position, he to whatever ranch would hire him. That was how it had to be. Vincent Vance wasn't meant for settling down, and a refined woman like Genevieve Fletcher deserved better than a saddle tramp with nothing to his name but a horse and the clothes on his back. When he returned to the cabin, Genevieve was attempting to stand, using the bedpost for support. Her nightgown hung loosely on her frame, evidence of the weight she'd lost during her illness. "What are you doing?" Vincent demanded, dropping the wood and hurrying to her side. "I need to move," she explained. "I've been in this bed for days." Vincent frowned. "You're still weak. Could fall, hurt yourself." "Then help me," she challenged, "just to walk around the cabin once." "Please, Vincent, I'm going mad lying here." He hesitated, then sighed. "All right, but just once around and then back to bed." Setting aside the wood, Vincent moved to her side, offering his arm for support. Genevieve leaned heavily against him, her legs wobbly from disuse. Together they made a slow circuit of the small cabin. "Thank you," she breathed, color returning to her cheeks with the exertion. "I feel more human already." Vincent nodded, hyper-aware of her warmth against his side, the delicate floral scent that somehow persisted despite days of fever. Even ill and disheveled, Genevieve Fletcher was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. The thought ambushed him, unwelcome and dangerous. "Back to bed now," he said gruffly, guiding her to sit on the edge of the mattress. Genevieve didn't immediately lie down. Instead, she looked up at him, her green eyes clear and direct. "You haven't slept properly in days, have you? Taking care of me, keeping the fire going." Vincent shrugged. "I'm used to it. Trail drives, you learn to go without sleep sometimes." "That chair can't be comfortable. The bed is large enough for two if we're careful." Vincent stiffened, taking a step back. "That wouldn't be proper." Genevieve smiled faintly. "I think we're well past concerns of propriety, Mr. Vance. You've been tending to me in my nightgown for 3 days. All the more reason to maintain what boundaries we can," he countered. "I'll be fine in the chair." She looked like she wanted to argue but nodded instead. "At least take the blanket. I have plenty here." Vincent accepted the blanket she offered, their fingers brushing in the exchange. A small contact, but enough to send awareness coursing through him. He retreated to the chair, wrapping the blanket around his shoulders. It carried her scent, a fact he tried desperately to ignore. "Tell me about Lone Pine," Genevieve requested, settling back against the pillows. "Have you been there before?" Grateful for the distraction, Vincent nodded. "Passed through a couple of times." "It's a growing town, got a proper hotel now, general store, even a small church. The ranch I'm hoping to work for, the Circle K, is one of the biggest in the territory. And the school, what's it like? New building, from what I heard. Town's proud of it. Lots of families settling in those parts, bringing children that need education." Genevieve smiled, clearly pleased. "I'm looking forward to it. Teaching has always been my passion." "You'll be good at it," Vincent said with certainty. "How could you know that?" she asked, surprised. He met her gaze. "The way you speak, patient but firm, children need that." His assessment touched her deeply. "Thank you." They fell into companionable silence as evening approached. Vincent prepared a simple supper, more beans, supplemented with jerky, and they ate together. Genevieve propped up in bed, Vincent in his chair. As night fell on their 3rd day together, the cabin felt different. The immediate crisis had passed, Genevieve's fever had broken, the storm had lifted, and a tentative normalcy had established itself between them. Yet beneath the surface, currents were shifting, drawing them into uncharted waters. Vincent stoked the fire one last time before settling into his chair for the night. Across the room, Genevieve watched him, her expression thoughtful. "Will you tell me a story?" she asked suddenly. "Something from your travels to help me sleep." Vincent hesitated. He wasn't a natural storyteller, preferring action to words, but Genevieve's expectant face wore down his resistance. "There was this time in Montana," he began hesitantly. "Driving cattle north from Texas. Met an old Blackfoot medicine man who'd been separated from his tribe." As Vincent spoke, his voice grew more confident. He described the landscape, the cattle, the old man's wisdom. Genevieve listened, entranced not just by the tale but by the glimpses it offered into Vincent's soul, his respect for the old ways, his keen observations of nature, his unexpected moments of poetry when describing the Montana sunrise. When he finished, Genevieve was smiling softly, her eyes heavy with approaching sleep. "You should have been a writer, not a cowboy," she murmured. "You have a way with words when you choose to use them." Vincent shook his head. Just telling what happened. No, she insisted. You're more than you appear, Vincent Vance. I wonder how many people have taken the time to discover that. The observation made him uncomfortable, cutting too close to truths he rarely acknowledged even to himself. Get some sleep, he said, deliberately changing the subject. You're still recovering. Genevieve nodded, recognizing his withdrawal but not pressing further. Good night, Vincent, and thank you for everything. Good night, Genevieve. As she drifted to sleep, Vincent remained awake, watching the fire and contemplating the strange turn his life had taken. 3 days ago, Genevieve Fletcher had been a stranger. Now he couldn't imagine riding away and never seeing her again. The thought troubled him deeply. Vincent had learned long ago the danger of attachments. In his world, people left through death, betrayal, or simple circumstance. Caring too much only ensured greater pain when the inevitable separation came. Yet as he watched Genevieve sleeping peacefully across the room, Vincent acknowledged a truth he could no longer deny. Something was happening between them, something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. The morning of the 4th day dawned clear and cold, sunlight streaming through cracks in the shutters to pattern the cabin floor with gold. Vincent had finally succumbed to exhaustion sometime in the night and slept deeply, waking with a start when he heard movement. Genevieve was standing by the window, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. The sunlight caught in her hair, turning it to molten gold. You should be in bed, Vincent said, rising stiffly from the chair. She turned, smiling. I feel much stronger today. The fever's gone completely. Vincent approached, pressing his hand to her forehead out of habit. Her skin was cool to the touch, the unhealthy flush replaced by natural color. Relief washed through him. Still, you've been mighty sick, shouldn't push yourself. I've imposed on your kindness long enough, she countered. It's time I started doing my share. Before Vincent could argue, Genevieve moved toward the fireplace. I can at least prepare breakfast. You've done enough. Vincent watched as she moved about the cabin, still slow but steadier than the day before. She hummed softly as she worked, a gentle melody he didn't recognize. The simple domesticity of the scene struck him with unexpected force. How natural it felt to wake to her presence, to share this small space as if they'd been doing so for years rather than days. What's that song? He asked, more to distract himself from these dangerous thoughts than out of genuine curiosity. Genevieve looked surprised. Just an old lullaby my mother used to sing. I didn't realize I was humming it. It's nice. She smiled, pleased by the compliment. Perhaps I'll teach it to my students in Lone Pine. Music makes learning more enjoyable. As they ate breakfast, the last of the beans and some dried fruit Vincent had found, Genevieve broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. How soon do you think we can travel? To Lone Pine, I mean. Vincent considered. Snow's deep, but the weather's clear. Your fever's broken, but you're still weak. I'd say another day or two here would be wise. Genevieve nodded, looking relieved rather than disappointed. That seems sensible. I wouldn't want to risk falling ill again on the journey. We're low on supplies, Vincent noted. Might need to try hunting if we stay much longer. Can you hunt in this snow, if necessary? Seen tracks near the cabin, rabbits, maybe a deer. Could set snares at least. Genevieve studied him across the table. You're remarkably self-sufficient, Vincent. I can't imagine surviving out here alone. You were doing it when I found you, he reminded her. Most city women would have given up. I'm hardly a city woman. I grew up on a small farm in Pennsylvania. And I wasn't exactly thriving when you arrived. Vincent shrugged. Still, you found shelter, made fire. That's more than many would manage. The praise warmed her. Perhaps we're both more capable than we give ourselves credit for. After breakfast, Vincent went to check on his horse and assess the condition of the trails. Genevieve, left alone, took the opportunity to properly wash using water heated over the fire. The trunk beneath the bed had yielded not only the dress Vincent mentioned but also some basic toiletries, a comb, a sliver of soap, even a hand mirror. She changed into the found dress, grateful to be out of the sweat-stained nightgown. The dress was simple but clean, a bit large but manageable when belted. Genevieve combed her hair as best she could, wishing for a proper bath but satisfied with the improvement. When Vincent returned, he stopped short in the doorway, momentarily stunned by her transformation. Clean, dressed, with her hair neatly arranged, Genevieve looked like a different woman, not the fever-ravaged patient he'd been tending, but a beautiful, composed young lady who would turn heads in any town. "You look," he began, then faltered. "Better, I hope," she supplied, smiling at his obvious surprise. "Yes, better." The word was wholly inadequate, but Vincent couldn't find others to replace it. "How are the trails?" she asked, sparing him further comment. Vincent gathered his thoughts. "Passable but difficult. Snow's deep but packed in places. Horse could manage with one rider, but two would be challenging. And it's cold out there, bitterly cold. So we wait," Genevieve concluded. Vincent nodded. "I set some snares. Might have fresh meat by evening." The day passed in comfortable domesticity. Genevieve insisted on taking over some of the cabin chores, though Vincent watched her carefully for signs of fatigue. They talked more freely than before, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future. Genevieve spoke of her teaching aspirations, her dream of eventually starting her own school. Vincent described the ranch he hoped to work for, maybe someday own property of his own. "Would you raise cattle?" she asked. "On your own land," Vincent considered. "Maybe, or horses." "Always had a way with them." "I can imagine that," she said, watching him tend the fire. "You have a gentle touch despite your size." Vincent felt heat rise in his face at her observation. "Just comes from experience." By evening, Vincent's snares had yielded 2 rabbits. He cleaned them outside, sparing Genevieve the bloody work, then returned to cook them over the fire. The smell of roasting meat filled the cabin, making both realize how tired they were of beans and jerky. "That smells wonderful," Genevieve sighed, inhaling deeply. Vincent smiled, one of his rare, full smiles that transformed his face. Nothing like fresh meat after days of trail rations. They ate by firelight, savoring every bite of the simple meal. Afterward, Vincent checked Genevieve's forehead again, a habit he couldn't seem to break despite her obvious recovery. "No fever," he confirmed. "You're healing well." "Thanks to you," she said softly. Their eyes met, held. Something electric passed between them, a recognition of the bond forming despite the brevity of their acquaintance. Vincent broke the contact first, standing abruptly. "Should check the horse before turning in." Outside in the cold night air, Vincent tried to regain his composure. He was developing feelings for Genevieve, that much was undeniable. But acting on those feelings would be foolish for countless reasons. She was educated, refined, destined for respectable work in town. He was a drifter, a cowhand with calloused hands and limited prospects. More importantly, she was vulnerable, still recovering from illness, dependent on him for protection and transportation to Lone Pine. Taking advantage of that vulnerability would make him no better than the bandits who'd attacked her stagecoach. Resolved to maintain appropriate distance, Vincent returned to the cabin. Genevieve had moved to sit by the fire, wrapped in a blanket despite the warmth of the room. "Cold?" he asked, concerned. She shook her head. "Just enjoying the flames." "Fire has always fascinated me, how it can both sustain life and destroy it." Vincent sat across from her, keeping the fire between them. Had a trail boss once who said fire was like a woman beautiful to look at, warm to be near, but dangerous if you got too close. Genevieve raised an eyebrow. And do you share that assessment, Mr. Vance? The corner of his mouth twitched. Never been burned by fire. Can't say the same about women. The admission surprised her. Someone hurt you. It wasn't a question, but Vincent answered anyway. Long time ago, doesn't matter now. Genevieve studied him across the dancing flames. Is that why you drift? To avoid getting too close to anyone? Vincent stared into the fire, uncomfortable with her perception. Maybe, or maybe I just like the freedom. I don't believe that, she said softly. No one truly wants to be alone. Some people are better off that way, he countered. Safer for whom? She challenged. You or those who might care about you. The question hit too close to home. Vincent stood again, retreating to his chair. It's late. You should rest. Genevieve recognized his withdrawal but didn't press further. She returned to the bed, settling beneath the covers. Good night, Vincent. Good night. Long after Genevieve's breathing had deepened into sleep, Vincent remained awake, her questions echoing in his mind. Was she right? Had he been running all these years, not toward freedom but away from the risk of attachment? The possibility was unsettling. Vincent glanced at Genevieve's sleeping form, wondering what kind of man he might have been if life had dealt him different cards. Could he have been the type of man worthy of a woman like her, settled, dependable, with something to offer beyond physical protection? The questions haunted him through another restless night. The fifth day brought warming temperatures and rapidly melting snow. By noon, Vincent estimated the trails would be passable within another day, 2 at most. The news should have brought relief. They could soon leave the isolation of the cabin for the comforts and society of Lone Pine. Instead, Vincent felt an unexpected reluctance. In the cabin, time had seemed suspended, creating a private world where only he and Genevieve existed. Once they returned to civilization, reality would reassert itself. She the respectable schoolteacher, he the itinerant cowboy. Genevieve seemed to share his ambivalence. Though she spoke enthusiastically about reaching Lone Pine and beginning her teaching position, Vincent noticed how she found reasons to delay their preparations, suggesting they should wait another day for her strength, pointing out that the trails would be muddy and difficult. No rush, Vincent agreed easily. Better to wait until conditions improve. They spent the day in companionable activities. Vincent repaired some loose boards in the lean-to, while Genevieve sorted through the cabin's meager supplies, setting aside what could be used for their journey. When he returned, she had prepared a simple stew from the remaining rabbit and some wild onions she'd found preserved in a jar. Smells good, he said, washing his hands in a basin by the door. Genevieve smiled. It's the least I can do after all you've done for me. They ate together at the small table, their knees occasionally brushing underneath. Each contact sent awareness racing through Vincent, though he tried to ignore it. Tell me more about this ranch you hope to work for, Genevieve said. The Circle K, was it? Vincent nodded. Owned by a man named Keller. Built it up from nothing over 20 years. They run about 2,000 head of cattle now, some of the best stock in Wyoming territory. And they're hiring, according to what I heard in Cheyenne, looking for experienced hands, especially those who can break horses. That's always been my specialty. You have a gift with animals, Genevieve observed. I've watched you with your horse. There's a mutual respect there. Vincent looked pleased by her assessment. Ranger's been with me 5 years, best horse I've ever had. What about the town itself? What kind of place is Lone Pine for living? Vincent considered. Growing fast, but still small enough to know your neighbors. Decent folks from what I've seen, the kind who look out for each other. It sounds wonderful, Genevieve said wistfully. After losing my parents, I've missed that sense of community." "You'll find it there," Vincent assured her. "Teachers are respected, you'll be welcome." "And you?" she asked. "Will you stay in Lone Pine if you find work at the Circle K?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Vincent met her eyes. "That's my hope. Been drifting long enough." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had dared voice before. Genevieve reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "I'm glad," she said simply. Vincent didn't pull away. Instead, he turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. The cabin seemed suddenly smaller, the air charged with unspoken feelings. "Genevieve," he began, unsure what he meant to say. A sound outside broke the moment, a horse's whinny, not Vincent's mount but another animal. In an instant, Vincent was on his feet, reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside," he ordered, all softness gone from his voice. "Away from the windows." Genevieve nodded, eyes wide with sudden fear. Vincent moved to the door, peering carefully through a crack in the shutters. Outside, a rider approached a single man on a dun horse, moving slowly as if searching for something. "Who is it?" Genevieve whispered. "Can't tell," Vincent replied. "Stay back." He watched as the rider drew closer, eventually recognizing the uniform of a territorial marshal. Relief flooded through him, and he lowered his rifle. "It's a lawman," he told Genevieve. "Probably searching for survivors from your stagecoach." Vincent opened the door, stepping onto the porch with his hands visible. "Hello there, Marshal," he called. "If you're looking for trouble, you won't find it here." The marshal reined in his horse, studying Vincent carefully. "Not looking for trouble," he replied. "Looking for passengers from a stagecoach that was attacked 4 days back. You seen anything?" Vincent nodded. "Found a survivor, Miss Fletcher. She's inside, recovering from fever." The marshal's face showed relief. "Miss Genevieve Fletcher, the schoolteacher bound for Lone Pine." "That's right." "Thank God," the marshal said. "Town's been worried sick. When the stage didn't arrive and we found the wreckage and bodies, we feared the worst. Been searching ever since the storm lifted." "She's alive," Vincent confirmed. "Was in bad shape when I found her, but she's recovering now." The marshal dismounted, tying his horse to a post. "Mind if I come in? Need to ask her some questions about the attack." Vincent stepped aside, allowing the lawman entry. Inside, Genevieve had composed herself, standing to greet the marshal with dignity despite her borrowed dress and the primitive surroundings. "Marshal," she acknowledged, "you're a welcome sight." The lawman removed his hat. "Miss Fletcher, glad to find you alive when we discovered the stage." He trailed off, not wanting to distress her. "I understand," she said. "I was fortunate to escape. Can you tell me what happened? Anything about the men who attacked you?" Genevieve nodded, relating the details of the attack as Vincent had heard them before. 4 men. The leader with a scar calling himself Rex, identifying as the Dixon Gang. The marshal noted the information. "Matches what we know of them. They've been terrorizing the territory for months now. But this is the first time they've killed." "Will you be able to catch them?" Genevieve asked. The marshal's face hardened. "Eventually. Men like that make mistakes. When they do, we'll be waiting." He turned to Vincent. "And you are?" "Vincent Vance. Was heading to Lone Pine looking for work when I found Miss Fletcher's horse wandering. Followed its tracks here." "And you've been caring for her since?" Vincent nodded. "Been here 5 days now. She was fever sick when I arrived, delirious. Kept the fire going while the storm blew through." The marshal studied Vincent thoughtfully. "That was good of you, Mr. Vance. Not everyone would have stayed." Vincent shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Couldn't leave her to die." "Well, the town of Lone Pine will be grateful. Miss Fletcher's position has been waiting for her school can't start without a teacher." The marshal turned back to Genevieve. If you're well enough to travel, Miss Fletcher, I can escort you to Lone Pine tomorrow. It's only about 15 miles from here, now that I know where we are." Genevieve glanced at Vincent before responding. "I believe I'm strong enough, though Mr. Vance has been suggesting caution." "The trail's clearing," Vincent said. "Should be passable by morning." "Good," the marshal nodded. "Then it's settled. We'll leave at first light." He looked between them. "I'll camp outside tonight, give you folks your privacy. Been a long search, could use the rest myself." Despite their protestations, the marshal insisted on sleeping in the lean-to, saying he'd endured far worse conditions in his years of service. Once he'd gone, Vincent and Genevieve found themselves alone again, but the easy intimacy of before had vanished, replaced by an awkward awareness of their impending separation. "Seems your ordeal is nearly over," Vincent said, stoking the fire. "By this time tomorrow you'll be in Lone Pine, ready to start your new life." Genevieve nodded, her expression unreadable. "Yes, thanks to you." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. The marshal's arrival had abruptly reintroduced reality into their isolated existence, reminding them of the world beyond the cabin and their respective places in it. "Vincent," Genevieve began hesitantly, "I want you to know how much." He held up a hand, stopping her. "No need for thanks." "Did what anyone would do." "That's not true," she insisted. "What you did was extraordinary. You saved my life at great personal risk and inconvenience." Vincent turned away, busying himself with unnecessary tasks. "You should rest. Long ride tomorrow." Genevieve watched him, hurt by his sudden distance but understanding its cause. The approaching return to civilization meant confronting the differences in their stations, the unlikelihood of any continued connection between them. "Will you still seek work at the Circle K?" she asked quietly. Vincent nodded without looking at her. "That's the plan. Then perhaps we'll see each other in town sometimes." "Perhaps." The noncommittal response stung more than it should have. Genevieve retreated to the bed, turning her face to the wall to hide the tears that threatened. Across the room, Vincent sat in his chair, rigid with tension. He wanted nothing more than to cross the space between them, to tell Genevieve how these days together had affected him, how the thought of returning to his solitary existence now seemed unbearable. But what could he offer her? A drifter's uncertain life, devoid of the comforts and stability she deserved. Better to maintain distance, to let her build the respectable life awaiting her in Lone Pine without complications. The night passed slowly, each lost in private thoughts as the fire gradually died down to embers. Morning arrived with clear skies and warming temperatures. The marshal was up early, preparing his horse and checking the trail conditions. Vincent readied Ranger while Genevieve gathered what few possessions she had: her original clothes, now clean and dry, and a small bundle of food for the journey. When all was ready, they stood awkwardly in the cabin that had been their shared home for 5 days. "Guess this is it," Vincent said, looking around to ensure nothing was forgotten. Genevieve nodded, unable to find words adequate to the moment. How did one say goodbye to the man who had saved your life, who had shown such care and tenderness, who had somehow in less than a week become important in ways you hadn't thought possible? "We should go," she said finally. "The marshal is waiting." Vincent nodded, holding the door for her. Outside, the marshal had prepared his horse to carry Genevieve while he would walk alongside. "Mr. Vance," the marshal acknowledged, "you're welcome to ride with us to Lone Pine. Town would likely want to thank you properly for saving Miss Fletcher." Vincent shook his head. "No need for that. I'll follow at my own pace." Genevieve felt disappointment wash through her at his refusal, though she tried to hide it. "You will come to Lone Pine, though, for the ranch job." "That's still my plan," Vincent confirmed, his expression giving away nothing of his inner thoughts. The marshal helped Genevieve mount his horse, then checked the cinch one last time. "Ready when you are, Miss Fletcher." She looked down at Vincent, standing beside Ranger, his face upturned to hers. So many things remained unsaid between them, feelings unexplored, possibilities unclaimed. "Goodbye, Vincent," she said softly, "and thank you for everything." He touched the brim of his hat. "Safe journey, Genevieve." The marshal began leading his horse down the trail, Genevieve perched in the saddle. She looked back once, seeing Vincent standing where they'd left him, a solitary figure against the backdrop of the cabin that had witnessed their unlikely connection. Then the trail curved, and he was gone from sight. The journey to Lone Pine took most of the day, the marshal setting a careful pace in deference to Genevieve's recent illness. They talked little along the way, Genevieve lost in thoughts of the man she'd left behind, wondering if she would ever see him again despite his assurances. Late afternoon brought their first glimpse of Lone Pine, a growing settlement nestled in a valley, smoke rising from chimneys, the spire of a small church visible against the mountains beyond. Despite its modest size, after days in the isolated cabin, it seemed like a metropolis. Their arrival caused immediate stir. Word spread quickly that the missing schoolteacher had been found alive, and by the time they reached the town center, a small crowd had gathered. The marshal helped Genevieve dismount, supporting her as curious faces pressed around them. "Give her space," he ordered. "The lady's been through an ordeal." A well-dressed woman pushed through the crowd. "Miss Fletcher, I'm Mrs. Henderson, head of the school board. We've been so worried." Genevieve summoned a smile. "I apologize for causing concern. I was fortunate to find shelter during the storm." "And fortunate that Mr. Vance found you," the marshal added. "She owes her life to a cowboy who kept her alive through the worst of the blizzard." Murmurs of interest and approval rippled through the gathered townspeople. Mrs. Henderson took Genevieve's arm. "You must be exhausted. We've prepared rooms for you at the hotel until you're settled. The schoolhouse has living quarters, but they're not quite ready yet." Genevieve allowed herself to be led away, overwhelmed by the attention, and the sudden transition from isolation to the center of public interest. The marshal followed, relating the tale of her rescue to the eager listeners. The hotel was modest but comfortable, a vast improvement over the cabin despite its rustic charm. Mrs. Henderson showed Genevieve to a clean, well-appointed room, promising to return later with proper clothes and necessities. "The school term was delayed awaiting your arrival," she explained. "But now that you're here, we can begin next week assuming you're recovered enough." Genevieve assured her she would be ready. When finally alone, she sank onto the bed, emotions overwhelming her. The comfort of the mattress, the clean sheets, the privacy, all things she would have craved days ago now seemed hollow without Vincent's steady presence nearby. She wondered where he was, if he had left the cabin yet, whether he truly intended to come to Lone Pine or if that had been a kind fiction to ease their parting. The uncertainty ached in her chest, a physical pain she hadn't anticipated. Days passed. Genevieve was introduced around town, shown the schoolhouse, invited to meals with prominent citizens. Everyone treated her with kindness and respect, exactly as Vincent had predicted. The story of her ordeal and rescue had spread, making her something of a local celebrity. "This cowboy," people would ask, "the one who saved you, will he be coming to Lone Pine?" Each time Genevieve would reply with forced lightness. "He mentioned seeking work at the Circle K. Perhaps he'll arrive soon." A week after her arrival, school preparations complete, Genevieve finally found time to visit the Circle K ranch. She told herself, It was simple curiosity about the place Vincent had spoken of, not a desperate hope of finding him there. The ranch was impressive, a large main house, bunkhouses for the hands, extensive corrals and barns. Cattle grazed on the surrounding grasslands, more numerous than Genevieve had ever seen. She was received politely by Mrs. Keller, who offered coffee and expressed delight at meeting the new schoolteacher. "Has a cowboy named Vincent Vance applied for work recently?" Genevieve asked, trying to sound casual. He helped me during the blizzard." Mrs. Keller shook her head. "No one by that name has come by. My husband mentioned hearing about a fellow who saved the new teacher, but he hasn't shown up looking for work." Disappointment crashed through Genevieve, though she maintained her composure. "I see. Perhaps he changed his plans." "Men often do," Mrs. Keller said kindly. "Especially those used to the drifting life." Genevieve returned to town with a heavy heart. Vincent had chosen not to come to Lone Pine after all. Perhaps the intimacy they'd shared in the cabin had been nothing more than a product of their isolation, meaningless once they returned to the wider world. The thought brought a grief she hadn't expected, not just for the loss of a potential relationship, but for the connection itself, the feeling of being truly seen and understood by another person. School began the following Monday. Genevieve threw herself into teaching, grateful for the distraction. Her students, 22 children ranging from 6 to 16, were eager and respectful, if somewhat behind in their studies due to the delay in starting the term. 2 weeks into her new position, Genevieve had established a routine. Mornings teaching, afternoons preparing lessons, evenings reading or accepting dinner invitations from town families eager to welcome her into their community. She was settling in, finding satisfaction in her work, if not the personal fulfillment she'd briefly glimpsed during those days in the cabin. Then came a Wednesday afternoon like any other. School had dismissed, and Genevieve was at her desk grading arithmetic papers when a shadow darkened the doorway. She looked up, expecting to see a student who had forgotten something or a parent coming to discuss their child's progress. Instead, Vincent Vance stood in the threshold, hat in hand, looking as uncertain as she'd ever seen him. "Vincent," she breathed, rising so quickly her chair nearly toppled. He stepped into the schoolroom, his eyes taking in the neat rows of desks, the blackboard with its chalk illustrations, before settling on her face. "Miss Fletcher," he said formally, "hope I'm not interrupting." "No," she assured him quickly. "School's dismissed for the day. I was just—" She gestured vaguely at the papers on her desk. Vincent nodded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "You're looking well. Recovered fully, I see." "Yes, and you, are you well?" "Well enough." An awkward silence fell between them, so different from the comfortable quiet they'd shared in the cabin. Genevieve searched for something to say, some way to bridge the sudden distance between them. "Have you found work?" she asked finally. "At the Circle K," Vincent nodded. "Started last week. Mr. Keller hired me to break horses and help with the spring roundup." "That's wonderful," Genevieve said sincerely. "Why didn't you come to town sooner? I inquired about you at the ranch, but Mrs. Keller said you hadn't been by." A flicker of something hope, surprise, crossed Vincent's face at her admission. "Took a detour after leaving the cabin. Had some thinking to do before coming to Lone Pine." "Thinking about what?" Genevieve asked, her heart beating faster. Vincent met her eyes directly for the first time since entering. "About what I want. What kind of life I'm aiming for." He took a step closer, his expression serious. "Been drifting so long I forgot what it's like to have roots, to care about staying in one place. Those days in the cabin with you, they reminded me." Genevieve hardly dared breathe, afraid to break the spell of his rare openness. "I came to town today for 2 reasons," Vincent continued. First, to see how you're settling in. Second, to ask if you might consider having dinner with me Saturday evening. The invitation, so formal and proper, was the last thing Genevieve expected. A surprised laugh escaped her. Dinner, like a proper courtship, Vincent's lips twitched. Figured we did things backward living together before even a proper introduction. Thought we might try the conventional approach now. Genevieve stepped closer, emboldened by his vulnerability. And if I prefer the unconventional, then I reckon we'll figure something out, he replied, his voice dropping lower. I just know I don't want to go back to drifting. Not when there's a reason to stay put. The admission, simple yet profound, melted the last of Genevieve's reserve. I would be delighted to have dinner with you, Mr. Vance, on Saturday or any day you choose. Vincent smiled then, a full smile that transformed his face and reached his eyes. Saturday it is. I'll call for you at 6. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. One more thing, Genevieve. Yes, I missed you something fierce these past weeks. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Genevieve standing amid her schoolroom, papers forgotten, heart lighter than it had been since leaving the cabin. Saturday arrived with agonizing slowness. Genevieve prepared with care, wearing her best dress, a blue calico that brought out the green of her eyes, and arranging her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual schoolteacher's bun. Vincent arrived precisely at 6, wearing clean clothes she hadn't seen before: dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. He'd clearly made an effort for the occasion, his hair neatly combed, boots polished. You look beautiful, he said simply as she opened the door to her rooms at the hotel. Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself. He offered his arm, and together they walked to the town's only restaurant, a small establishment attached to the hotel that served surprisingly good food. Heads turned as they entered, curious townspeople watching the new schoolteacher and the cowboy who had saved her life. Their table was private enough for conversation, and once the initial awkwardness passed, they found the same easy rapport that had developed in the cabin. Vincent told her about his work at the Circle K, his plans to save for land of his own someday. Genevieve shared stories of her students, her growing attachment to Lone Pine. The town has been so welcoming, she said, just as you predicted. Good people here, Vincent agreed. The kind worth settling among. As the evening progressed, the reason for Vincent's delay in coming to Lone Pine emerged. He'd gone first to Cheyenne, to the Territorial Bank. Had some money saved, he explained. Not much, but enough to start something. Placed a claim on a parcel of land just outside town, 100 acres with good water access. Genevieve's eyes widened. You bought land, but I thought that I was just looking for work as a ranch hand, Vincent smiled. That was the original plan. Then I spent 5 days in a cabin with a woman who made me reconsider everything I thought I wanted. Vincent, she breathed, touched beyond words. It's nothing fancy, he cautioned. Just land for now. No house yet, no stock beyond Ranger, but it's a start, something I can build on. The implication hung between them that he was building not just a ranch but a future, one that might include her if she wished it. I'd like to see it sometime, Genevieve said. Tomorrow, Vincent suggested. I could take you after church if you're willing. I'd like that very much. They walked back to the hotel after dinner, the spring evening mild and clear. Stars spread across the sky in dazzling profusion, reminding Genevieve of nights in the cabin when she'd been too ill to appreciate such beauty. At her door, Vincent hesitated, clearly uncertain about proper protocol. Genevieve solved his dilemma by rising on tiptoe to kiss his cheek. Thank you for a lovely evening, she said softly. Vincent caught her hand as she began to pull away. Genevieve, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I'm not good with words, never have been. But I want you to know those days in the cabin, keeping the fire going while you fought that fever, changed something in me, made me want things I'd given up on long ago. Genevieve squeezed his hand. It changed me too, Vincent. I came west seeking a new beginning, but I found something I never expected: someone who sees me as I truly am, who values me not despite my independence but because of it. I do see you, he confirmed, and what I see is the most remarkable woman I've ever known. The words, simple but heartfelt, moved her deeply. Vincent leaned down, hesitating a breath away from her lips, giving her the chance to withdraw if she wished. Instead, Genevieve closed the distance, pressing her mouth to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened into something more passionate. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Vincent rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, his voice husky. After church, Genevieve nodded, reluctant to end their evening but aware of propriety. Until tomorrow. Their courtship progressed swiftly after that night. The shared experience of the cabin had laid a foundation stronger than months of conventional dating might have built. They understood each other in fundamental ways, having seen one another at their most vulnerable and most resilient. Vincent worked at the Circle K during the week, spending evenings and Sundays developing his own property. Genevieve threw herself into teaching, quickly becoming a beloved figure in the community. On weekends, she often accompanied Vincent to his land, offering suggestions for the house he was planning to build that summer. By June, 3 months after their reunion in the schoolroom, Vincent had completed a small but sturdy cabin on his property, larger and more carefully constructed than the one where they'd first connected, but reminiscent enough to make Genevieve smile when she saw it. "It's perfect," she told him, exploring the 2 rooms with delight. "You've thought of everything." Vincent watched her, enjoying her pleasure in his creation. "Still needs furniture, proper windows, but it's a start." Genevieve turned to him, suddenly serious. "It's more than a start, Vincent. It's a home." The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Vincent crossed to where she stood by the empty fireplace, taking her hands in his. "Could be our home," he said quietly. "If you wanted it to be." Genevieve's heart raced. "Vincent," he knelt before her, still holding her hands. "I'm not a wealthy man, Genevieve, don't have much beyond this land and what I've built on it. But everything I have, everything I am, is yours if you'll have me. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Genevieve's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you." He stood, gathering her into his arms with a joy that transformed his usually serious face. "I love you, Genevieve Fletcher. Have since those days in the cabin, though I was too stubborn to admit it then. And I love you, Vincent Vance. Fever or no fever, you're the best thing that ever happened to me." They were married in Lone Pine Small Church, the first Sunday in July, 1876. The whole town turned out for the celebration. Vincent's employer and fellow hands from the Circle K, Genevieve's students and their families, even the marshal who had found them in the cabin. Mrs. Henderson had initially expressed concern about losing her teacher to marriage, but Genevieve assured her she intended to continue teaching at least through the next school year, until the couple was more established on their ranch. Their wedding night was spent in the cabin Vincent had built, a fire crackling in the stone fireplace despite the summer warmth, a deliberate echo of their first days together. "Reminds me of when we met," Genevieve said, watching the flames, "though I was hardly in a state to appreciate you then." Vincent pulled her close against his side. "I don't know, you called me the cowboy with the kind eyes even in your delirium." She laughed, remembering. "Did I? How embarrassing." "I liked it," he admitted, No one had ever described my eyes as kind before. Because no one had ever seen you as I did, she replied softly. Tending a stranger through fever, keeping the fire going 3 nights straight. Not many men would have done that, Vincent. Not many would have been rewarded as generously, he countered, kissing her gently. Found my purpose, my home, my wife, all because a stray horse led me to that cabin. Providence, Genevieve suggested. Maybe so, he agreed. Or maybe just the luckiest wrong turn I ever took. The years that followed proved the truth of Vincent's words. Their ranch flourished under his careful management, expanding from the original 100 acres to 500 by their 5th anniversary. Genevieve continued teaching until the birth of their first child, a son they named James after Vincent's father. 2 years later, their daughter Elizabeth arrived, followed by another son, Thomas, in the spring of 1882. Their family complete, Vincent and Genevieve watched their children grow amid the beauty of Wyoming territory, instilling in them the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion that define their own relationship. Lone Pine grew as well, becoming a prosperous town of nearly 2,000 souls by 1890. Genevieve returned to teaching once Thomas started school himself, eventually realizing her dream of founding a secondary school that prepared students for college or professional training. Vincent's reputation as a horseman spread throughout the territory, bringing customers willing to pay premium prices for his carefully bred stock. The Vance Ranch became known for quality and fair dealing, allowing them to build a larger home as their prosperity increased, though they kept the original cabin, using it as a guest house and occasional retreat when they wanted to remember their beginnings. Each year on the anniversary of the day, Vincent had found Genevieve in the abandoned trapper's cabin. They would spend an evening alone together by the fire, no matter the season or weather. It became their private tradition, a time to reflect on the journey that had brought them together and the life they had built since. You ever wonder, Genevieve asked on one such evening, 20 years after their first meeting, what would have happened if you hadn't found my horse that day? If you'd continued on your original path to Lone Pine, Vincent considered, his hand absently stroking her silver-streaked hair as she rested against his shoulder. I try not to think about it. The idea of you alone in that cabin, the fever taking you. He shook his head, still unable to contemplate the possibility even after so many years. But if you had come straight to Lone Pine, she persisted. If we'd met under ordinary circumstances, you the ranch hand, me the new teacher, would we have found each other still, do you think? Vincent smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. I'd like to believe so. Might have taken longer, required more formal courtship, but I can't imagine any version of my life that doesn't include you, Genevieve. She turned her face up to his, the love of 2 decades shining in her eyes. Nor I you, my cowboy with the kind eyes. Vincent chuckled at the old endearment, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness he'd shown the fevered stranger in a storm-bound cabin all those years ago. Some things changed with time, their bodies growing older, their family expanding to include grandchildren now, but the essential bond between them remained as strong as ever. Outside their comfortable home, the Wyoming night stretched vast and star-filled. Inside, the fire burned bright and steady, tended by the same hands that had kept it going through those 3 crucial nights so long ago, nights that had saved a life, and in doing so, created a love story that would be told in Lone Pine for generations to come.